The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. Dinosaurs of British Columbia are coming to Nanaimo. Starting Saturday, the Nanaimo Museum will be hosting a traveling exhibit from the Royal BC Museum, which highlights dinosaurs that once walked what is now BC. Later on in the show, we'll go more in depth on dinos and the fossil record in the province, but first, I got in touch with the Nanaimo Museum's curator, Amy Greenaway, to learn more about the museum's upcoming Dinosaur Summer.
We are very excited about this exhibit. We've been looking forward to it for a long time. As soon as we heard that the Royal BC Museum was making a traveling version of their big dinosaurs exhibit that they did a few years ago, we were lined up right away asking if we could host in Nanaimo. And we have a lot planned. So for the exhibit itself, really, the star of the show is Buster, who is a Ferrosaurus, and he's a unique dinosaur species in BC. And there's a lot of really interesting backstory to how the bones were found and what that research process has looked like over the last 50 plus years. And Dr. Victoria Arbour at the Royal BC Museum has been doing really fascinating research with Buster. So when you come to the exhibit, you can see a sculpture, a replica of what we think Buster looked like. And he comes from northern BC, and I think that's a really exciting part of the story and of this exhibit because so many people are interested in dinosaurs, people of all ages, but to really focus in on what is paleontology and dinosaurs in British Columbia is very cool. Some of the closer locations to Nanaimo that are discussed in the exhibit are Denman Island, and also, as far as Buster and that project, there's a lot of interactive elements in this exhibit. So you can look at short video clips that show Dr. Arbour and colleagues in the field out doing the work, which is not something that many of us ever get to see. And they're working in very remote, difficult to get to places, which is also gives us a bit of a peek into that. And of course, as soon as you have a dinosaur theme, you attract families and kids, which we're really looking forward to seeing lots of families and kids. And so a number of the interactive elements are game-like and geared to children. So we're really hoping that there's people from all ages can come to this exhibit, like families can come together, multi-generational, check out all these different pieces. If you're a kid, you can play the fun interactives. If you're an adult, there's fossils on exhibit that come from the Royal BC Museum collection. So there's really going to be a lot to see.
How many people are you expecting the promise of dinosaurs to draw out compared to really any other kind of traveling exhibit?
Well, hard to say, but we are really thinking that there are a lot of people who are going to come for this. And of course, dinosaurs are in any museum are often a big draw. And we know that we've talked to a lot of people who are changing their travel habits and are sticking close to home this summer. So we're wondering if we'll get people from different parts of Vancouver Island that might be in Nanaimo and looking for something to do. And so part of trying to, attract people to the exhibit is we're offering some of our own programming for kids. One of them is an I Spy activity, which is for younger kids. And we've got 12 dinosaurs hidden all over the museum's main gallery. So you go through the gallery and you look for the tiny dinosaurs. This is one of our most popular programs, our I Spy series. And we also have Dino Dig Days happening on Saturdays and Sundays and Stats in July and August. So you can actually come into the museum. We have little boxes set up that have kinetic sand in them. We've bought replica fossils in there to go in there, and you can actually go through the process of doing your own dig with our staff.
I don't want to give too much away, but is there like maybe one fast fact or something that you learned during the process of setting up this exhibit about dinosaurs in BC that you think is really cool and you would want to share with people?
There's two things. For me, I was so excited about Buster. I think that's just such a great BC story. And so often we think about dinosaurs as these, huge skeletons in museum galleries, and he's just a little guy. So that's kind of neat just to have that different perspective on. There's so many, obviously, types of dinosaurs, but I was really fortunate when the exhibit was being installed this week to work with the Royal BC Museum team on doing what we call condition reporting of all of the fossils that came in. So when you move artifacts or specimens between museums, as soon as you unpack them, you do a condition report just to make sure there's been no damage in shipping. And I was absolutely thrilled to unpack that ammonite box, because one of the most beautiful places in Nanaimo, of course, is Ammonite Falls. So if you are someone who's visited Ammonite Falls and would like to learn a little bit about ammonites, you can see some specimens at the museum in the dino exhibit.
You mentioned off the top that the exhibit is opening Saturday for the first time. It's going to be there through part of September at the very least. Is there anything else you think it's important to let people know about dinosaurs coming to the Nanaimo Museum?
I think that going downtown to visit dinos is a great opportunity to just take in some of the other activities that are happening downtown as well. The museum will be open during the downtown night market. So if you're downtown for the night market, you can pop into the museum and get some air conditioning break from outside and take a look at the dinosaur exhibit and just check out some of the other stores and the work that's happening at the art gallery.
Amy, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Amy Greenaway is curator of the Nanaimo Museum.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada and generous listeners like you. Support and grow our nonprofit newsroom project today at chly.ca/donate with a monthly or one-time donation. With your support, we can expand Midcoast Morning from 2 to 3 original programs per week to cover local news, current affairs, and arts and culture.
With the Nanaimo Museum set to welcome an exhibit on the Dinosaurs of BC this summer, I got in touch with Victoria Arbour from the Royal BC Museum to talk about what life looked like in this neck of the woods 66 million plus years ago.
I am Victoria Arbour, and I am the curator of paleontology at the Royal BC Museum in Victoria.
And I am excited to talk to you today about dinosaurs in BC. Maybe an important prerequisite to do that is if we flash back 66 million odd years to the end of the Cretaceous period when dinosaurs were wiped out. Where was BC? What did it look like kind of geographically?
Oh, what a great question. So it depends a lot on where you are in BC. BC has this really interesting geological history where parts of us are on sort of the western shore of an ancient seaway that goes up through the middle of North America. There's mountain building going on. But most interestingly, parts of BC are actually located a lot further south relative to their current positions. So a lot of BC is built up by these various sort of like island arcs, almost kind of like today's Japan or Indonesia, that are smashing on to the rest of Canada over millions of years. And then they're also sliding northward. So they sort of come from the west to the east, and then also go from the south to the north. So some parts of BC are located a lot further south. Some parts of BC are actually still out in the ocean, or just coming close to land at that point. And so it's really complicated, which is partly what's fun about looking for dinosaurs in BC, because we have all these different time periods and all these different places represented.
Okay, so take me into what that means. What are some of the different dinosaurs that are on the fossil record that we know of so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the Royal BC Museum, we have projects in a couple of different places in British Columbia looking for dinosaurs and studying dinosaurs that have already been found. One of our field projects is in Spatsizi Plateau Wilderness Provincial Park. And there we are looking for dinosaur bones from the very end of the Cretaceous up in these high alpine environments. We are also working on dinosaur footprints that are much older, about 110 million years old, from the area around Hudson's Hope. We have some projects on the go in the Tumbler Ridge area where we're looking at dinosaur footprints that are about 100 million years old. And we also have some things looking at footprints found in the coal mines in the southeast. So we've got lots of footprint projects. And then we're also working on these more rare bone sites as well.
Are there any maybe specific species that have been identified that are unique to our area?
That is a great question. So yes, we have dinosaur bones from a species that hasn't been found elsewhere in Canada or the world at the Royal BC Museum. They're from a small dinosaur who we nicknamed Buster for a long time. And in 2019, it got the new name Ferrosaurus sustatensis. And Ferrosaurus is kind of like a small relative of Triceratops, about the size of like a big sheep. Without the big horns and frill, but with kind of a similar face shape to Triceratops.
And I understand that Buster plays a part in this exhibit that's coming to the Nanaimo Museum. That's sort of the reason why we're talking today.
Yeah, for sure. So Buster is kind of the star dinosaur in that exhibit in many ways. The Dinosaurs of BC exhibit is trying to show really that we have dinosaurs in BC, which is not something a lot of people think about sometimes, especially being the sister province to Alberta, which has lots of dinosaur bones. And so we're kind of trying to show how there are actually lots of different dinosaurs across the province, representing these different times and different types of fossils. But Buster is definitely kind of like our star specimen right now as sort of the unique dinosaur species from BC. And so in the exhibit, you'll see replicas of the original bones that are in the museum's collection. And you'll also get to see a really beautiful model of what Buster would have looked like while he was alive.
Where do dinosaur fossils turn up in BC? Where can you go looking for them?
Yeah, so we go looking for them in a sort of geological region called the Sustut Basin. And it's kind of this skinny, long crescent that stretches from like about Smithers to about Dease Lake. And so Buster comes from the southern part of that area, about an hour's flight north of Smithers along the Sustut River. And then the bones on the Spatsizi Plateau, which are closer to Dease Lake, are up in the mountains, but they're the same type of rock. And that's where we made a really big discovery this summer where we actually found an area with hundreds of dinosaur bone fragments basically at the top of a mountain, which we were pretty excited about. So that's where we get some of the bones. And then you can also get bones out by Tumbler Ridge as well.
What are some of the factors that make a place more likely to have dinosaur fossils kicking around?
Some of the things that will make it more likely, there's a couple of factors. First of all, is you have to have rocks that are the right age. If they're from after the dinosaurs go extinct, you're not going to find dinosaur fossils. If they're from before dinosaurs first evolved, you won't find dinosaurs. So you have to get that window where dinosaurs actually exist on the planet. Seems obvious, but those rocks aren't everywhere. So, that's sort of the step one. And you also have to find rocks that are formed in the right places. So you need to have rocks that weren't formed in like magma tunnels and lava deep underground, or that have been squished and folded by mountains. You need rocks that were deposited on land. We call them sedimentary rocks, and not necessarily in the ocean either. So we need to have sort of like land-based environments like rivers or lakes, where you can actually get fossils preserved. And then the final step is that you have to have rocks at the surface where you can actually get at them. So if they're covered up by a city or by a forest, you're not going to necessarily find dinosaur fossils easily. So that's why a lot of paleontologists work in like deserts, because you've got rocks exposed where you can actually go look at lots of them. So this is why we like working up in the mountains in BC, because we work up above the tree line, where we can actually get at lots of rocks. In BC, we also tend to find dinosaur fossils along riverbanks, where, you know, you've got sort of rock ledges exposed along rivers. And it's also why we find them in the coal mines, because they're exposing lots and lots of rock surfaces while they're excavating coal. And that's another way that we can find dinosaur fossils in BC. The final aspect I should also say is just luck. So sometimes you can have all of those factors and you still won't find dinosaur fossils because they just didn't get preserved there. That wasn't the right chemical conditions. They all got scavenged before anything could survive. A dinosaur just didn't die there to get fossilized. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. So there's a lot of luck. And then there's putting yourself in those like right places that have sort of the better chances of having dinosaur fossils.
How about Vancouver Island specifically? Earlier on, we were talking about like where was BC back 66 million years ago plus, and also with that last question of where do dinosaur bones come up? What's the condition on Vancouver Island? Has anything ever been found here?
Yes, we do have dinosaur bones from Vancouver Island. It's not the best place to find dinosaur bones, but it is a place we can get them, which is pretty cool. Vancouver Island during the Cretaceous period, that last chunk of time during the age of dinosaurs, is kind of like small islands and then ocean sediments that are kind of being pushed towards mainland British Columbia, and were probably located a lot further south, more like sort of like Washington State, maybe down as far as Oregon. And so we're further south. It's warmer. It's more tropical. Most of the rocks that from that age on Vancouver Island were formed in ocean environments. So sometimes in deep water, sometimes in shallow water. And those rocks are called the Nanaimo group. That's the word geologists use for them. You can find Nanaimo group rock exposures everywhere from about like Duncan up to Campbell River. So if you're on the beach, on the coastline, if you're on like rivers in that area, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to find fossils. A lot of those fossils are marine animals, so you can find things like clams, snails, crabs, and ammonites, which are those coiled shells that are so beautiful to find and really cool. Everybody really likes ammonites. Very, very rarely, we have dinosaur bones that have washed into those ocean environments and been preserved. So maybe they sort of died on the beach and then got carried out by the waves and sank and were fossilized. So in the Dinosaurs of BC exhibit, we have one little tailbone from a feathered ornithomimid dinosaur. So those are the ostrich mimic dinosaurs. Look a lot like an ostrich with a long tail. And it's a little tailbone that drifted off into these deep water ocean environments and was preserved and then was found on Denman Island.
Now, not technically dinosaurs, but in the ballpark, the world of marine reptiles, people who have been to the Courtney Museum will certainly remember the elasmosaur skeleton they have there. What can you tell me about marine reptiles and maybe their relevance to our area?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So marine reptiles are super cool. And exactly like you said, they're not dinosaurs, but they certainly are kind of like distant cousins. They're in that kind of reptile side of the animal family tree. They're their own unique, distinct things. And there's actually a couple of different groups of marine reptiles. So they're not necessarily all closely related to each other. The elasmosaur is part of this bigger group called plesiosaurs. And so it's kind of a long-necked, flippered animal that would look a little bit like the Loch Ness Monster. If you've seen pictures and drawings of the Loch Ness Monster, that's what an elasmosaur looks like. And so, yeah, we're really lucky that the Puntledge River elasmosaur, which is housed and on display at the Courtney and District Museum, a couple years ago was designated the official provincial fossil of BC. And then just a couple weeks ago, it was actually given a new scientific name. So it was recognized as a new species, and it's called Trascasaura after the folks who found it originally.
And in doing my research to prepare for this, I learned for the first time, apparently, plesiosaurs, they breathed air. They were kind of like whales. They would have to come up to the surface.
Yeah, exactly. So just like today's reptiles, things like sea turtles or, other reptiles that go into the water like alligators and crocodiles. They were air breathing animals. So they weren't fish. They didn't have gills. These are animals that would have to come up to the surface. Now, they probably spent their entire lives in the water. We know from other fossil elasmosaurs that they actually gave birth to live young. So they would basically be pregnant with like one big baby in there. So they didn't lay eggs like we tend to think of like sea turtles doing. And so they probably just stayed in the ocean their entire lives and probably never really came up onto land. So just like today's whales.
I want to ask you about the pathway to doing the work that you do. What was it like? How did you become a paleontologist working at the Royal BC Museum?
Yeah, I was a little kid that really liked dinosaurs and then never grew out of the dinosaur phase. So I count myself super lucky that I get to think about dinosaurs as my job every day here at the museum. So I had like super supportive parents and teachers, and they encouraged me to pursue like science and excel in like math and writing and all kinds of good stuff like that. I have a bachelor's degree in earth sciences and biology from Dalhousie University because I'm from Nova Scotia originally. I went off and did a master's and PhD in paleontology at the University of Alberta, so in like Dinosaur Central for Canada. I like to joke with kids that I was basically in grade like 22 by the time I actually finished school. But it was great. And when you do a master's and a PhD, it's really more like sort of doing the job. You're not really taking classes. You're usually doing scientific research projects and things like that. Then I did some sort of contract jobs in North Carolina and at the Royal Ontario Museum before I landed my job here. So I've been here since 2018, and it's a great job. A big part of my job is doing scientific research. I also do a lot of communicating about science, so doing things like the Dinosaurs of BC exhibit, talking to you, giving presentations, writing stories about what we do. And then I also help steward the province's fossil heritage. So I help other researchers make sure their fossils are going to come here to the museum. I help with organizing the fossil collection and sort of seeing where we have gaps and where we should maybe try to get new things. And making sure that the team here is looking after all of these fossils. So I don't work alone. There's a team of people, and we all have a lot of fun thinking about dinosaurs and also thinking about all the other cool fossils in BC.
Are there any maybe recent discoveries or things the scientific community is working on as regards dinosaurs that have yet to make their way through to kind of the general public consciousness?
Oh, how interesting. So, of course, we've got a lot of projects on the go here at the museum that we're excited about. One of the stories that we just talked about a few weeks ago was identifying new types of dinosaur footprints from the Tumbler Ridge area. So I was a part of a team that was naming a new type of dinosaur footprint species, and they were the first examples of footprints left by tail-clubbed armored dinosaurs. So the group that I like the best, the ankylosaurid ankylosaurs, and they're known basically just from the Tumbler Ridge area and a couple examples in Alberta. So that was pretty fun. And we've got some other new dinosaur footprint species in the works that I'll keep secret for now, but I hope people will stay tuned to what we're doing here. The Dinosaurs of BC exhibit is really just kind of like, in many ways, showing the beginning of a lot of work that's been happening in BC, and there's lots of cool stuff yet to come, new things and new types of dinosaurs for BC.
What does the world of dinosaurs have to teach us about the world today?
Yeah, I think that what a lot of people would probably think of most when they think about dinosaurs is the fact that they're not around anymore, so that they've gone extinct. And that's actually a little bit of a misunderstanding because birds are dinosaurs. They've directly evolved from feathery meat-eating dinosaurs, kind of like Velociraptor. So all the birds around us today are categorically dinosaurs. So dinosaurs are survivors, but they are also this really important emblem of extinction, right? And I think that one of the most important things to understand is that you can be super successful. Dinosaurs were really diverse. They were kind of, the the important animals in many of their ecosystems. You know, they were the big herbivores, the big predators. They came in many different shapes and sizes. They were around for a really long time, way longer than we've been around. And when their environment changed too quickly, they couldn't adapt and they went extinct. And that same thing can happen to us. And so I tend to think about it in terms of like climate change is like our meteor coming for us. So the dinosaur extinction is caused by a meteor that causes too many changes to the environment too quickly for things to survive. And we've got a similar thing going on right now with human-caused climate change, where we're changing the environment really, really fast, faster than we've seen in a really long time. And we don't really know what's going to happen, but we do know from looking at the fossil record that when things change too fast, things are going to go extinct. Some things are going to survive, other things are going to go extinct. And so I think there's a lot that we can learn by looking at the fossil record to understand some of those patterns better. And then maybe make different choices about what we're doing today.
Could you give me maybe a bit of a glimpse of what that mass extinction event was like? So beyond, I think most people know the big theories that a big meteorite hit somewhere near the Yucatan Peninsula. Then what happened? How did that lead us from dinosaurs or kind of the dominant species to now where, if it's fair to say, it's kind of transitioned to mammals?
Yeah, no, I think it's very fair to say that we're sort of in the age of mammals rather than the age of dinosaurs now. So a lot of paleontologists and geologists and all kinds of different scientists have spent a lot of time looking at this very specific extinction event. So we actually have a pretty good idea now of what happened at a very granular level on that day and in the years after. People are still sort of debating like the sort of the specifics of it, but what we know is that a very large asteroid crashes into Earth in the Yucatan Peninsula. It's called the CHLY impactor. It's about the size of Mount Everest, so it's very large. When that impacts, it releases so much energy that there are like shock waves and tsunamis, and the dust that gets kicked up by that giant impact event goes up into the atmosphere and then comes back down. When it comes back down into the atmosphere, it creates a lot of friction in the air. So, you know, like when like the space shuttle is re-entering the atmosphere, it's got that big plume of like fire around it, and that's just from the friction of the air heating up. The same thing happens, but with like millions and billions and trillions of little pieces of dust that actually heats up the atmosphere to like the temperature of an oven. So if you are an animal out in the air, you're kind of cooking to death. It's pretty grim, but that is what was happening. And in particular, it's really hard to breathe. So that is actually almost the single reason that dinosaurs go extinct, is that they are too big to hide from this heat pulse, as it's described. So the heat pulse kills everything basically over a certain size threshold that can't hide by like hiding in a pond, getting into a cave, burrowing underground, staying somewhere where it's cool. That heat pulse lasts for like about a day. And if you can't breathe for a day, you're not going to make it. So lots of things are dead within about 24 to 48 hours. That's how severe this impact is. Following that, the remaining very fine particles in the air block out the sun and basically halt plant life from being able to photosynthesize for, we estimate, like several years. It might be like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but it takes a long time for plants to get going again. So any of those surviving animals now also don't have any food to eat. So you have a better chance of surviving if you're small, can hide, and can scavenge and survive off basically like dead and decaying things. So that's how our ancestors make it through, because our ancestors are small little rodent-like animals that are good at living off of the scraps of other things. So sometimes it's good to be a scavenger in order to be a survivor. Eventually, the planet sort of re-equilibrates, that dust settles out, and the slate has been largely wiped clean. And so that's when we get the ascendance of mammals. Birds diversify into all their interesting shapes and sizes that they have today. And the other animals that make it through, like crocodiles and lizards and turtles, keep on keeping on. And we see sort of the planet that we have now.
So everything that's alive on Earth today that's an animal probably descended from something that was rather small enough to survive this heat pulse. Anything that was a really large animal back in the day is kind of gone, has no real ancestors unless they had like really small distant cousins from way back in the fossil record?
Yeah, pretty much. That's our understanding of it right now. Of course, new evidence could shift and change like how we understand it, but that seems to be sort of the common thread is if you were small and not super specialized. So, if you're an animal that's small, but you can literally only eat this one specific fruit to survive, you're probably not going to make it because that fruit is going to be gone. So you've got to be something that is adaptable. If something similar were to happen today, something like a raccoon might live very well, or rats or animals like that. Elephants would probably be gone. Giraffes would probably be gone. But those sort of small scavenger generalist animals would be able to make it through.
Is there anything else you think it's important to let folks in and around Nanaimo know about dinosaurs now that they can go and check out this traveling exhibit from the BC Museum?
I think the main thing that I really like is that we still have so much to discover about BC fossils. So even in places where we've known about fossils for a long time, like on sort of the west coast of Vancouver Island, or the east coast of Vancouver Island, west coast of Canada, east coast of Vancouver Island, we're still finding new fossils and new species and new types of things. So we do not have all the answers. The work is not done. It's really more at the beginning in many ways. And a lot of discoveries are made by people out there enjoying the outdoors and telling us what they've found. So I'm always happy to hear from people if they think they've found a fossil. It is how we find out about new things sometimes. And so anyone can find something new. And there's definitely like new things still to be found. So enjoy being outside and let us know what you find.
Victoria Arbour, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Victoria Arbour is Curator of Paleontology at the Royal BC Museum in Victoria. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and Arby Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chly.ca/donate. If you're already a supporter, record a voice memo telling others where you're listening from and why they too should support our work. After you're done, you can email it to us. Also, share the podcast with your friends. While Meta is blocking Canadian users from sharing news content on their Facebook feeds, you can still share our podcast directly with your friends via Facebook or Instagram Messenger. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Nanaimo First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.